Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Know Your Members notable names in Latin American, Hispanic American history for Latin American Hispanic American, Latin American Heritage Month. But, which is almost over, but I've been behind on every episode thus far, and as is for today's, which is meant to be Fridays. But anyway, yeah. If you see me reaching for something to eat, munching on blackberries. Anyway, let's get into this video. Today, we are talking about Sylvia Rivera. And this first piece of information is from the Latino branch of the Smithsonian Institute. And it starts off, it just has a small blurb, unfortunately, but here's what it says. It says, Latina and Latino boundary breakers have shaped U.S. history. Latino groups have fought for fair labor practices, education access, safe housing, immigration, and criminal justice system reform, and LGBT rights, among other issues. Puerto Rican Venezuelan activist Sylvia Rivera, 1951 to 2002, stands on the left outside New York City Hall with fellow activist Marsha P. Johnson. This right here is Sylvia. But yeah. They fought for gay and transgender communities in New York City, focusing on issues like homelessness and unemployment. Rivera loudly criticized racism and economic exclusion within the LGBT community. Yeah, it's like you've got one marginalized community, and there's even further marginalization in that same marginalized community, like racism and economic exclusion. Even though they're usually lumped together, there's often people who have hate for certain people in other parts of the community. There might be lesbian or bi and say, I don't like trans people, or I don't like these people, or this people. And it's like, come on now. Anyway, let's head over to biography for Sylvia Rivera. She became an outspoken transgender rights activist after participating in the 1969 Stonewall riots. If you want to know anything about LGBT history, the Stonewall riots is one of the big points to really start, to know how long the troubles they've faced have been. Yeah, it was horrible. Let's see. She was she was one of the most influential activists in the gay liberation movement of the 60s and 70s. A drag queen and transgender woman, she was a key figure of the Stonewall riots in 1969 and later co-founded the Gay Liberation Front, which became a leading group in the movement. She also co-created the transgender rights organization STAR with fellow LGBTQ activist Marsha P. Johnson. Unfortunately, Rivera would pass away from cancer in 2002 at the age of 50. Some basic information. Born July
In the
2nd.
Netflix anthology Monster, though this isn't the first time Geen, or at least his story, has been brought to screen. We'll tell you about the
What? What the? Who started playing something
fictional
I didn't?
characters Geen has helped
Hey,
inspire.
how about you shut up? I don't want your things on on what I'm reading here. Damn. Anyway, let's get back into this since we were interrupted here. Born July 2nd, 1951, died February 19th, 2002. She was born in New York City, New York. But yeah. Specifically in the borough of the Bronx in New York City. And was assigned male at birth and was of Puerto Rican and Venezuelan descent. She had a troubled childhood, starting with her father's abandonment shortly after her birth, and as a toddler, she was orphaned when her mother died by suicide. Her grandmother stepped in to raise her, but Rivera was rejected and beaten for her effeminate behavior. At age 11, she ran away from home and became the victim of child sexual exploitation. While living on the streets, she met a group of drag queens who welcomed her into the fold. It was with their support that she took on the name Sylvia and began identifying as a drag queen. Later in life, she considered herself transgender, though she disliked labels. Against the backdrop of the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and the Vietnam War protest of the 60s, Rivera's activism began to take shape. And in June 1969, at the age of 17, she took part in the famous Stonewall riots by allegedly throwing the second Molotov cocktail in protest to a police raid of the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Manhattan. Yeah, and it's a big moment. Government crackdown on a place where people different than normal gather. Different from what you may be used to seeing, you may be used to knowing, but are still human beings and deserve treatment as human beings. The 6-day event was one of the major catalysts of the gay liberation movement, and to further push the agenda forward, Rivera co-founded the Gay Liberation Front the next month. In later interviews, Rivera reminisced about her special place in history. We were frontliners. We didn't take shit from nobody. We had nothing to lose, she said. Along with the establishment of the Gay Liberation Front, she teamed up with friend Martha P. Johnson to co-found STAR, full name being the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, in 1970. The group met regularly to organize and discuss political issues affecting the trans community. Soon after, the activists founded the Star House in Manhattan's East Village to provide food, clothing, and housing for LGBTQ youth in need. Like Rivera, Johnson had also been homeless as a teenager. Rivera was only 19 years old at the time. Later, she recalled that she and Johnson had decided it was time to help each other and help our other kids. So yeah. Y'all better quiet down speech. Defiant of labels, Rivera co founded many of the mainstream gay liberation movement because of her own diverse and complex background. She was poor, trans, a drag queen, a person of color, a former sex worker, and someone who also experienced drug addiction, incarceration, and homelessness. So she's been down at the bottom, the very bottom. For all these reasons, Rivera fought for not only gay and trans rights, but also for racial, economic, and criminal justice issues. But the gay middle class white men and lesbian feminists didn't seem to understand or share her passion for uplifting marginalized groups within the larger LGBTQ community. Angered by the lack of inclusion, Rivera delivered her fiery "Y'all better quiet down" speech at the 1973 Christopher Street Liberation Day rally in Washington Square Park. Amid boos from the crowd, she said, "Y'all tell me go and hide my tail between my legs. I will no longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment. For gay liberation, and you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with y'all? Think about that." Yeah. Eager to protect the rights of trans people, Rivera advocated for the passage of New York City's gay rights bill in the 1970s, which aimed to prevent discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations, and she was arrested while petitioning in Times Square. Although the trans people were initially included in discussions about the bill, the final version passed in 1986 only prohibited discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. So yeah, leaving out trans and certain other groups, it's like, oh, if you're gay or lesbian, you can't be discriminated against, but it don't talk about others. They have a little backroom deal without inviting Miss Sylvia and some of the other trans activists to this backroom deal and these politicians. The deal was, you take them out, we'll pass the bill, Rivera later explained. Feeling betrayed by the movement she had fought so long and hard for, Rivera left the city and disappeared from activism for many years. It was around this time that she started catering business in Tarrytown, New York. She eventually returned to the fight for trans issues, starting in the mid-1900s. Amid cultural conversations around the issues like gay marriage and LGBTQ people serving in the military. She joined ACT UP, or the AIDS Coalition, to unleash power during the HIV/AIDS crisis. Although she wasn't a founding member, she participated in protests and demonstrations with the organization in New York City with the aim of raising awareness of AIDS and fighting for better treatment of people living with the disease. She also began working as a food pantry director at Metropolitan Community Church. On the 25th anniversary of the Stonewall riots in '94, she was given a place of honor in New York City's Pride Parade. following a suicide attempt in May 1995, she reflected on her own place in the gay rights movement. The movement had put me on the shelf, but they took me down and dusted me off, Rivera told the New York Times. Still, it was beautiful. I walked down 58th Street and the young ones were calling from the sidewalk, "Sylvia, Sylvia, thank you, we know what you did." After that, I went back on the shelf. It wouldn't be wonderful if the movement took care, or it would be wonderful if the movement took care of its own. After years of living on the streets, in 1997, she moved into Transy House, a collective in Brooklyn that provided housing to trans people. It was there that she met her partner, Julia Murray. The two were close friends for a long time before they began dating in 1999. She's a person that has made my life different, Rivera said of Murray to the New York Times that June. She's helped me. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not drinking so much. It's just we're happy together. The couple stayed together until until Rivera's death in 2002. Yeah, they would only be together for 5 years. Not even that. 99, so 3 years. That sucks. That's just, it's a sad thing to hear about. February 19th, 2002, she dies from liver cancer at St. Vincent's Catholic Medical Center in New York City. And in honor of her activism in the gay and trans community, the Sylvia Rivera Law Project was founded just months after her death. The organization provides legal aid to trans, intersex, and gender nonconforming individuals, especially people of color. The pioneering activist remains a pivotal figure in the history of LGBTQ rights movement to ensure trans issues weren't overlooked. Rivera is the only transgender person included in the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian. So, they have a National Portrait Gallery, and she is the only transgender person. Notations, they got some of her quotes. Yeah. And for some words, I'm aware they are more offensive now than they were back in the day. So if anybody is offended, I'm sorry. I'm just giving this out as it is. I try not to censor myself, but I try to make it aware I'm not saying these things just to be a horrible person. There is a difference between reading for saying things for knowledge, for understanding, and say them just to be an asshole. Anyway, all that information was from biography. Now we'll look at Wikipedia, see what else we can add to it we have missed here. New York City girl. Born, died New York City. She did spend some time in Tarrytown, but for the most part, yeah, New York City girl. Drag queen most of her life, and later as a transgender person. Born and raised Puerto Rican father and Venezuelan mother. She was abandoned by her birth father, Jose Rivera, early in life and became an orphan after her mother died by suicide when only 3. Rivera was then raised by her Venezuelan grandmother, who disapproved of Rivera's effeminate behavior, particularly after Rivera began to wear makeup in the 4th grade. Yeah. There were very strict, as tends to be with older people, your grandparents, your great grandparents. Many of them have very idolized views of what gender norms are. And especially in that era, there was no problem beating the kid for doing what you thought was wrong. Doesn't excuse it, but yeah, in that era, it was very common. At the age of 10, so it's 10 or 11, she would begin living on the streets of New York after she ran away from home. Homeless, so young in the community, she would, unfortunately, be a part of survival sex and child prostitution. Because, unfortunately, you can make money that way. There's always going to be those people. But she would be taken in by local drag queens, including Marsha P. Johnson, who would become Rivera's best friend and protector. In the tight-knit community of drag queens and street hustlers who hung out on 42nd Street, she was christened with her new name, by an old butch dyke and an old queen, the godfather and godmother of 42nd, who chose the name for her, Sylvia Rivera. She would begin activism in 1970, although they're also suggesting she was at the Stonewall riots, which is in 69, so before she was even 18, she was taking part in several, well, at least one of the biggest of the Stonewall riots. She sometimes exaggerated her importance, purporting to have been active in the civil rights movement, the movement against the Vietnam War, and second wave feminist movements, as well as Puerto Rican and African American youth activism, particularly with the Young Lords and Black Panthers, but she could not necessarily prove her claims. That's alright. We know she was involved with a lot of other LGBTQ issues. Rivera and Johnson co-founded STAR and offered services and advocacy for homeless queer youth, and fought the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act in place in New York. Uh, that act prohibited discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, or they fought for it in New York, because it would prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in employment, housing, public accommodations, education, credit, and the exercise of civil rights. So, yeah. Uh, Martha P. Johnson, Rivera's friend, clearly was cited at the Stonewall Inn during the riots. She is one of the few people who multiple independent witnesses all agree was instrumental in the week of rioting. So, yeah, a week long it turned into a riot. Known to have been in the vanguard of the pushback against police once the rioting peaked late the first night, though she admitted to not being the one to start the riots. Uh, okay, so there's claims by others that of her even being at the riots is based on contradictory statements that Rivera made and on testimony relayed to him by early gay rights activists, such as Martha P. Johnson, who denied the multiple interviews that Rivera had been there. Okay. Apparently, Rivera always hung out uptown at Bryant Park and never came downtown where the Stonewall riots were. Let's see. Johnson had told gay rights historian Eric Marcus that in the hours prior to Johnson arriving downtown to join the riots, she had attended a party uptown and that Sylvia and them were over in Bryant Park having a cocktail. Okay, so she wasn't necessarily at Stonewall. Her friend was. But yeah. Let's see. After Martha Johnson confronted Rivera about lying about Stonewall at the 73 rally, Rivera left Manhattan in the mid 70s, relocating to Tarrytown in New York. In these years, Rivera lived with her lover, and together they ran a catering business. Rivera shares footage of the drag show she hosted at the music hall in Tarrytown uh, in the documentary The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. In early July 1992, shortly after New York City Pride March, Marsha P. Johnson's body was found floating in the Hudson River off the West Village piers. Police promptly ruled Johnson's death a suicide. Perhaps the present despite the presence of a head wound. Johnson's friends and supporters, Rivera included, insisted Johnson had not been suicidal, and People's Postering campaign later declared that Johnson had earlier been harassed near the spot where her body was found. Mm-mm-mm. After receiving a telegram with the notification of her friend's death, she returned to New York. Now homeless, she took up residence at the Gay Piers at the end of Christopher Street and became an advocate for homeless members of the gay community. In May of '95, Rivera tried to end her life by walking into the Hudson River. She would even go to Italy for a march there, 2000 Millennium March. To help keep LGBTQ movement in the forefront. Let's see, 2001, she decided to resurrect STAR as an active political organization, now changing transvestite in the full name to the new term transgender. So, yeah. It fought for the New York City Transgender Rights Bill and a inclusive New York State Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act, SONDA. So she would push for a lot of fights for rights. She was there, but she wasn't always the most honest about her involvement, how forefront she was, but she was always there. She always seemed to have been fighting for rights, though. In 71, she spoke of herself as a half sister. In her essay, Transvestites, Your Half Sisters and Half Brothers of the Revolution, she specifically claims her use of transvestite as applying to only the gay community. Transvestites are homosexual men and women who dress in clothes of the opposite sex. Male transvestites dress and live as women. Half sisters, like myself, are women with the minds of women trapped in male bodies. Okay. And again, I apologize for the use of some of these terms. I know they're not as accepted as they were in the way they recognized people. Like she changed transvestite to transgender. But again, we're trying to look at things from how it's listed, how it's shown. Because unlike the right wing in this country, I believe history should not be censored. She would write of having considered gender affirming surgery much earlier in life, but of ultimately choosing to reject it, taking hormone therapy only near the end of her life. Left home at age 10 and 61. Hustled on 42nd Street. The early 60s was not a good time for drag queens, effeminate boys, or boys that wore makeup like we did. Back then, we were beat up by the police, by everybody. I didn't really come out as a drag queen until the late 60s, when drag queens were arrested. What degradation there was. I remember the first time I got arrested, I wasn't even in full drag. I was walking down the street and cops just snatched me. People now want to call me a lesbian because I'm with Julia, and I say, no, I'm just me. I'm not a lesbian. I'm tired of being labeled. I don't like being labeled transgender. I don't even like the label transgender. I'm tired of living with labels. I just want to be who I am. I am Sylvia Rivera. Ray Rivera left home at the age of 10 to become Sylvia, and that's who I am. Oh yeah, she would pass liver cancer. In 2002, activist Ricky Wichens noted, in many ways, she was the Rosa Parks of the modern transgender movement. She actually was an active member of the Metropolitan Community Church of New York and ministered through the church's food pantry, which provided food to hungry people. So she seems more Christian than many Christians today, unfortunately. Many of them want to hurt people rather than do as Jesus would have you do and help people. But yeah. So, interesting. She definitely had an impact on the rights, especially for transgender people. Even drag queens, where she started out after she ran away from home being one, so. But yeah, that'll be the end of the episode. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.